Thank you again to everybody, and welcome to our fifth episode about the constitutional process in Chile. It's always done together with Columbia University in Santiago, on the current interim director, Antabat. Thank you very much. Yeah, it has always been a very good and very pleasant cooperation between the two institutions. Thank you once again. A few things before we start. I spoke about interpretation. There's interpretation into English. If you rather speak or to listen to English, we're welcome. There's the button, interpretation button. You can push that, and you're going to be listening to that in English. There's a video about this seminar that we're going to be uploading in our website today or tomorrow, the latest, for those of you who want to listen to it again, or perhaps send it some friends or colleagues who are interested on this in this topic. As I said earlier, this is the fifth episode in this constitutional process. We started with Domingo, I don't know, Domingo, okay, 2 years ago, a year and a half. We talked about some outstanding issues about the first proposal about women, gender issues, indigenous people's rights, economic rights, and social rights. We did a postmortem about the after the rejection of first proposed constitution. Now that we are on the eve of another vote about a referendum about a new proposal, and we are going to be looking into that and the differences between the current proposal and the current constitution, the first proposal about a year ago. Well, with that, it's an honor to introduce our panel members. First is Verónica Undurraga, who was the president of the expert commission, also a professor from the School of Law in Alfredo Ibáñez. Domingo Lovera is a member of the expert commission and also professor for law at the Diego Portales University. And at the end, but not the least, Robert Funk, who's a professor at the Department of Government at the University of Chile. And also, he is also a consultant to Andy's West Analysis or something like that. Andy's West, right? Is it, Robert? Okay, thank you. Anyway, welcome to everybody, and we'll start with the first question. And Domingo, if you could tell us in general lines, where are we along this process? What is going to go on next? You're muted, Domingo. Okay. Thank you, Ken, for setting up this series of seminars again. We started during the last part of the previous stage, attempting to tell about the proposals and the proposals from the Constitutional Convention. And we, if correct me if I'm wrong, we were careful to have different views about the issues that you mentioned. Ownership rights, women's rights, indigenous people's rights, and others that I'm still I'm happy we have the relationship between the University of Diego Portales and the Kennedy Council, and I'm also very glad that we have joined with Columbia, where I did my doctoral thesis in Toronto, so I'm doubly at home together with Robert and Veronica, who are going to be making better contributions than myself. In 2 minutes, let me tell you what the form of the process is. This process started after the rejection on September 4 last year to the proposed convention. There had been a will to from the different political forces, including those who promoted the rejection of this proposal. To, so when it was rejected, we would start a new constituent process. I had to make part of that group that negotiated that constitutional reform. Uh, a week after the rejection, we had already started to have those meetings, and that helped me as hot therapy for that happened. I was I turned the page very quickly, and it ended with the process that we have today. At the end, this process had two major parts. One was led, to say so, by the expert commission made up by 24 people represented from the various political forces with representation in Congress. And I would say it generally showed a sort of technical tie between two views. Left and right, there were two big blocks of right and left, central left, who were present in this expert commission. And they worked for 3 months to produce a pre-project for the Constitution, and that we gave to the Constitutional Council, which is the second body that worked on this process, and they received that pre-project from the expert commission. And this is a body, the Constitutional Council is 50 people selected by popular vote based on the election system of the House of the Senate, with one representative from indigenous peoples, and we had the all powers to discuss about it, to approve, modify, or reject what the expert commission had offered as a background to start with. The Constitutional Council also worked for 3, 4 months and did their work. And on Monday, 3 days ago, uh, the proposal was given to the President of the Republic, Gabriel, who called for the plebiscite, which is going to take place on 17 December. So what we're going to do in this a few days and this is the campaigns about the two positions that are going to be on the December ballot about this constitutional proposal, or for or against that proposal. This is what slightly more than a month uh, from what the country is going to be defining. Domingo and Verónica, as the president of that commission, what was your job? What was your work in that process? And what challenges did you face? Or was there some competitions, or there was a few full battle uh, between the members of the commission? Thank you, first of all, for the invitation. Ken, I also am a former student of Colombia, so I'm very happy to be here and to participate for the second time or third time in these dialogues. But the work of the expert commission uh, was to provide a pre-project, a full pre-project, that is a proposal for a constitution that would include all the permanent articles and the temporary articles, so that the elected council could work on that text. And we had 3 months to write up a proposed constitution for the pre-project. And it was a major challenge because, as I said, Domingo says, we were appointed by the political parties that had or that have presence in Congress, and the proportion uh, uh, was half right, center right, and half about center left to the left. I mean, the whole spectrum of the left, and to be able to approve these rules that were included in the pre-project, we had 3/5. We needed 14 votes out of 24. So we would convince two people from the other side to support our proposal, or they would convince us, or we would reach, or we broke the pencil in half, uh, and we wrote the uh, proposals together in agreement. From the very beginning, the vice president of the uh, uh, group, I was also the president and the vice president, which was right. I am the center left. Uh, he he said that uh, we're not going to be divided, or anything. So we were going to uh, discard this possibility of getting the two votes from the other side. So the whole was a very agreements for that work. It's a very challenging, very difficult, but we did that, and I think that we consolidated uh, since the beginning this idea that our purpose was to offer to the council a pre-project that would be acceptable for all the political currents. So that was very enabling. Uh, we would not commit to a specific ideology. We wanted a sort of neutral constitution that would allow the uh, government to govern under this constitution. That was the characteristic. And I can say that that was a very satisfactory stage in this process because most of the rules were approved by unanimity for the 24 commissioners. Uh, so it was also a challenge because we had to deliver the project during the first week of June. And on 7 May, there were elections for the council. So we're going to see what was the political uh, composition of the body that was going to work on this project. So, as you know, the political makeup of the council was very different from what the expert commission was. We were balanced in the council. We had an overwhelming majority from the right, uh, with the hegemony from the extreme right. But at this time, we had consolidated as an expert commission, and we were able to complete the work of this pre-project without major difficulties. And we offer the text that I show you with these characteristics. So let's start to speak about what we have in the new proposal. So let me start with Domingo again. Domingo, what there's a major difference between the theory of the Constitution and um, substantial ideas in the new compared to the 1980 Constitution. And what are the major differences? Look, Ken, I'm trying to keep my equanimity here, to be unbiased. That's all I always invite you to. Let me take back a little bit of what Verónica was saying in the expert commission. She also led together with Sebastian, another alumnus from Colombia. We're at home here. Um, the project for the expert commission, given the composition of the group, prevented any sector to be imposed their opinion. And that was virtuous. It was designed. We were practically guide, and also an attitude. We had the advantage of having worked on a poor experience in the previous constitutional constitution commission, and enabled us to make agreements and agree, not without an effort, about rules that we were not that didn't leave everybody happy, but it would enable them to accept some of the political concepts. And some were very good results in the operation of the constitutional bodies in general. It, we were uh, looking at enabling um, constitutional proposal, and this is the first warning for you. I would say that it keeps or it kept it, it was based on the expressions and the institutions that were contained in the 1980 text. You understand, for those who come from the left and in Chile, that it was a major concession because it was a proposal imposed by a dictatorship. And what we tried to do was to review, because there are, which of those provisions also had a Chilean history in 1925 and 1833. But the council, I think, what we did and what was go back to the expert commission's steps and offers a much more detailed proposal. It closes the paths and uh, uh, shows some proposals of the political policies, and they dismounted some of those proposals that we had worked on earlier with all the democratic legitimacy, because it was elected, popularly elected. We never have doubt about the legitimacy of the council to do what they did. But when we looked at that from the outside, we found that unfortunately, at least in spite of me, there was something that raises that enabling proposal, and Jose Pineda, who I called a pamphlet, and they said, accuse me of of denigrating the. He wrote a note where they actually the fact that there was somehow they have gone beyond what the dictatorship was able to do in investments. So that it radicalizes some public policy issues in terms of health, makes it radical in education, freedom of teaching, and social benefits in general. And as we've said, they have serious technical problems, and they're perhaps going to put the state, according to Professor Gonzalo Garcia, former minister of the Constitutional Court, they're going to put the Chilean state in a very complex task of trying to implement a proposal that ends it's too detailed. So I would say that the the pre-project of the expert commission uh, uh, free some the 1980 constitution of some very partisan positions. We go back uh, to that, took the constitution of 1980 and makes it more detailed than that constitution. So I insist. Uh, I want to find some similarities. The proposal that we're going to be analyzing is very much based on the current constitution. I would say makes it more radical. Unfortunately, it doesn't offer too many ways out of the problems that we had identified earlier. We're going to be talking about some specific issues, for example, on women's rights or uh, rights of the indigenous peoples, which were the issues that we looked into in previous episodes, and social rights in general. What can you say specifically about what we have in this new proposal uh, vis-a-vis the current constitution? Domingo and Verónica also the same. Thank you for your question. I think that, and I agree with Domingo that in general, there's a lot of similarities between the proposal of the Constitutional Council and the Constitution of 1980s political system, which we have two-chamber Congress, control of constitutionality, and what Domingo says, we have the state status quo. we have a subsidizing state in social rights. In social rights, what we did in the expert commission was to give peace of mind to the investors, to the economic world, and to maintain the constitutional economic, the freedom of the enterprise, uh, tax guarantees in general. Uh, so we had maintained um, autonomy of the central bank. Certain key pieces of the public economic public order remain the same. For example, remember that the Constitution current uh, has the most detailed clause, the clause about the property ownership rights. It's so that we have no uncertainties about the for the economic world. But we all agreed on that. That was our concession to the uh, requirements of the right. But we added a catalog of social rights that did not exist. There were some mentions in the Constitution of 1880 about social rights, which uh, were justifiable. Now we have a catalog of social rights. We established some guiding principles whether to decide without deciding on specific issues. And that was the explanation that we gave. First, that we had to include the Constitution only that what we agreed on, and what we didn't agree on, we had to leave that up to the legislator, union freedoms and all that. Uh, but it is something that is left up to democratic debate. And there was something that we worked with Domingo, that we maintained the protection actions uh, which people were very much interested in maintaining that action, which in Constitution 1980 only exists for the freedoms. And we expanded that to social rights in a very responsible manner because it is the legislator who should implement the public policies, establish the legal issues, and the protective action would to protect those rights that have been established by the uh, legislator, but also gave some guidelines, non-discrimination, remove obstacles so that people can have access to their rights. So there's a number of guidelines to make those rights effective. And the council that proposed the replacement, it was left exactly the same. It was even strengthened, I would say. These guarantees of economic freedoms, the protection specifically for ownership, some procedures and mechanisms for compensation uh, related to expropriation, and about the social rights. It was no, it was created basically as a constitution, a specific way uh, made by the other rights of how to regulate social rights, and that includes the freedoms for education, the freedom of the parents vis-a-vis the establishments, and the schools, private schools, vis-a-vis the state, compared to the guarantees for quality or equality in terms of education. In terms of indigenous peoples, both the commission and the council were obliged to established a clause to recognize the existence of the indigenous people, and that was part of the procedures that we've agreed on. So that article was included, okay, but it didn't mm, very turned out into a very uh, power uh, to define by the legislator to establish some policies for that. For example, the Venice Convention, the European body that supports the constitutional processes around the world, said that they recommended to set up some mechanisms for political participation of the indigenous peoples. That was not possible here. It was part of the trauma of this previous convention. We had a sort of very reactionary attitude. We wouldn't, well, we couldn't do it. The women, we have to think of what the state of things when we started. The previous convention and this process had all the bodies were equal. The expert commission had have women, have men. The Constitutional Council also, the third body, which is the Technical Committee of Admissibility, which was for claims if we couldn't follow the process. It was also a paritarian. So it was just of we were using the same political process. The expert commission had to do a lot of concessions. What we did was to write a clause which could be interpreted um, uh, allowing for variety in the entrance or how to leave the candidacy, and a very specific uh, rules to include the correction mechanisms, which we had a lot of criticism about that, and also a clause for a temporary clause for a quota for Congress, 40, 60 men and women. The temporary clause was there, um, and we changed that for the permanent clause to prevent the parity and only uh, parity in the candidacies. And there are other rules or about the women's rights. Basically, the feminist movements was not very happy. Compare that to the Constitution of 1980, which says nothing, although the men and women are equal under the law. Oh, yes, you could say there was some advances in this respect, but if you compare that to the advances of women's rights in cultural terms, uh, in legal terms in Chile also, there was a very, very reticent concessions. Let me ask Robert. Um, Robert, let me ask you a question from Cindy Arneson. Thank you for that. How do you approach the issue of citizen security, the role of the armed forces? Domingo would like to provide an answer.
Bien, te respondo breve para darle paso a Robert. A ver, yo creo que hay que tomar
We have to
suerte de declaración inicial, que no la voy
make
a hacer yo,
an
sino que
initial
la voy a
statement.
responder en términos de pregunta, y es
I'm going to just
cuánto puede hacer
put it out as a question.
o
How
cuánto
much
puede
can
lograr
we do, how achieve
en materia de
by
seguridad.
constitution in terms of
Yo creo que
security?
hoy día, yo creo que
And
hoy
I
día
would
uno podría
differentiate.
comparar,
If you look at the
advertir que
you can
efectivamente
see that
tratándose de la defensa
in
nacional,
terms of
las
national
constituciones
defense,
chilenas
the
efectivamente
constitutions
tienen
usually contain
cláusulas dirigidas al
uh,
resguardo
regulations to
de las
protect
fronteras y al
its
resguardo de
borders
la defensa
and
del país.
the
Y ese rol
and
está
the country,
consagrado
defense of the country, and that is
por
given
las
to
Fuerzas Armadas.
the armed forces.
Tenemos la regulación que las
There's less
condiciones
regulation
de
for the
seguridad
constitutions
y seguridad
in
ciudadana
terms of
no están
citizens
todas en
security.
perfecto, ¿no?
Where
Pero
there
no
are,
son todas.
at least what I've seen, which is not all of
En
them,
materia de seguridad ciudadana,
regulations
me
for
parece a mí que el
citizen
Estado federal
security
interactúa de
is
la única forma en que
they're
interactúa
more
la
in
policía, digamos,
federated
federal
states in which you have
con
the
las policías
uh,
provinciales o las estatales, ¿no?
regulate the actions between the federal police and the
Eso quizás
central
podría servir
police.
más allá de esas regulaciones
So I
puntuales.
think that there's
Em,
we need more
en
regulations
cuanto
in that
al
terms.
tema
Um,
debate que tuvimos sobre
in the
si se debe
proposal, in
incorporar
addition to some debate of
artículos
including a
de
specific
las
change
Fuerzas Armadas,
or a specific chapter for the armed
desde
forces,
la tradición
is not part of the constitutional
si está
transfer.
desde 1980
We do have that something in Chile because that
en
was
contexto de una
written in the
dictadura.
context of military
Creo
dictatorship.
que es una
I think that this
que es alta en mandar
is
señales que creo que van a tener que
high
ver
in terms
con
of signals that are
lo que
going to
Fernando
be
Alzada
not
estuvo
very
en
effective.
París, un profesor de la
Alzai is
Universidad
a professor of
Lovera de España.
Buffalo
Él se
Fabula in
reunió con personas
Spain.
que
He
venían de
read the
sectores
proposal because
socialistas y él me
he
dijo,
came to talk about social
siempre
rights. He
buscando,
says if you look at this proposal,
tiene la impresión de que Chile es un
you
país
get the idea that
asediado
Chile
por el terrorismo.
is
Y me llama la atención, dijo, porque
full of
la propuesta
terrorists
española,
because the Spanish
redactada en
proposal, written
1978,
in
se redacta
1978,
cuando ETA está muy
was written
activa
when
en
ETA
Chile.
was very
Está
active.
secuestrando gente, está
It's kidnapping people,
asesinando,
it's killing people.
está
They
realizando
were
atentados. Y la
carrying out
Constitución española de
attempts, and
1978 tiene
the
una
Constitution
sola
of Spain,
disposición
1917, has only one provision,
relativa a ciertos
very
estados
general,
de excepción,
about certain
estados de excepción.
threats in terms of the state of
Pero
exception.
yo veo en la chilena una
But I
propuesta
see in the
que se
Chilean,
incorpora y
especially
cuando yo no veo
uh,
una, o me dijo
felt
que
about
esto debería ser
terrorism, or
incorporado, no veo una actividad
I don't
terrorista que
see
requiera esta
terrorist activity that requires such a
Luego, en materia de
regulation in our
seguridad
church.
ciudadana,
In terms of citizen
he
security, I've
hecho un par de
been
entrevistas sobre este tema
giving a
y me
couple
parece
of
muy
interviews about this.
significativo de que
There's a lot of
no se
signals
pueda
that
llegar a nivel constitucional.
uh,
El principal
take to this
signo
constitutional level and the major
una serie de
difference.
regulaciones
A
que se han
number of
dado en la
regulations that we
legalidad.
have been
Déjame mencionar
set
solo
up
dos.
legally. I give
Servicios
you an
penitenciarios
example.
para las víctimas, que arrancan desde el
Defense services
diagnóstico
for
de
the
errores
victims.
equivocados de política
A very
pública,
wrong
que van a terminar
diagnosis for
desacreditando
economic
si es que hay
policies,
una política
which
pública
break
general
up
en materia de
a
seguridad y
general
van a empezar a
policy for
aparecer
security, which is going to make it
personas que van a poder reclamar
private. Actually, people are going to be able to
excepciones, o sea, un estado
claim
constitucional de emergencia
emergency constitutional
redistribución
actions, a redistribution
de la
of
política
the
criminal para tener
criminal
más
policy to
policías
have
en
more
el barrio,
policy, more
esas
police
acciones son
in
políticas
their
públicas a
regions.
través del
Uh,
acceso judicial.
it's
Eh,
meddling
hay un
into
avance que se están
public
produciendo a
policies.
nivel
There are advances
de legislación y de hecho
in
hay un debate
legislation.
público
There's
desde el año 2011 en
since
el mismo concepto de
2011, the same
defensoría
constitutional
de la
text
defensoría de las
of
víctimas.
creating
No se ha
a
creado
defense group for the victims.
y
It
hay
hasn't been created in
una
12
orquesta
years
constituyente
because
que
of
se
political,
participa
because
con quórums muy elevados para
they have very
lograr los
high
acuerdos.
quorums for agreements in this constitution. I don't see why
Y eso se
now,
va a
in a couple
traducir
of
en
months, we're going to
legislación bien rápido.
pass a law that in 10
Pero creo
years
que hay
we haven't
cosas buenas
passed.
también.
In terms of the armed
Creo que
forces,
el
also,
involucramiento de las Fuerzas
the
Armadas
involvement of the armed forces that I knew
con el
is
tema
something was
de
discussed in
proteger el
Canada.
involucramiento de las
The
Fuerzas Armadas en
involvement of
seguridad
the armed
de
forces
infraestructura crítica
in protecting the critical infrastructure,
hoy día se
although it
legisla
is
de
legally
manera
regulated,
constitucional.
now it is
Nosotros
taken
como
to a
expertos
constitutional
estuvimos
level. We
en la comisión
were
expert
willing in the expert
a
commission
revisar
to
esas modificaciones porque nos
make
parecían
those changes because we
necesarias
thought it was
y requiere de algunas
it
aclaraciones. Yo creo
requires
que el Consejo
some
ha
signals,
sido
but I think that
demasiado
the council
generoso
has
en
gone
muchas
too
situaciones.
generous
Yo creo que
in
tiene
sending a lot
mucha
of signals
regulación
that have problems
en
for
materia de
implementation,
fronteras,
severe
en
technical
materia
problems as well,
fronteriza, fronteriza, que
um,
nadie sabe dónde va a quedar y
creating
hay que depender
a border police.
de
I don't know where we're going to
los
put
recursos,
it, where they're going to get the
y
resources.
creo yo que van
And
a
unfortunately, I think they're going to
terminar ofreciendo
be
una falsa seguridad
offer some false
a la ciudadanía.
signal of security for the citizens.
Robert, gracias por
Robert,
su paciencia.
thank you for your patience.
Bueno, ¿cómo
Well,
llegamos a ese punto?
how did we come to this point?
¿Qué ha cambiado en la
What
política?
has
La
changed
visión que
in
tenía hace par de
the
años,
vision that you had a couple of years ago,
cuando empezamos
or
a
when we
discutir
started to
la
discuss
Asamblea Constituyente? Yo creo que
the Constitutional Assembly? And I think that what um,
Domingo
Domingo just
y Verónica se
described, and
referenciaron
Veronica up
a
to
esto fue
point two,
somos,
that was
tiene una
that
visión
wasn't
compartida en el
it
terreno
was a
político,
shared
¿no? ¿Qué
political
ha
view.
cambiado? ¿En qué
What
momento
has
estamos
changed?
pasando ahora en la política de Chile?
What is going on in Chilean politics? I think that if you look at the process for the past 4 years and you look at it from the outside, well, the country asked for a new constitution. They designed a constitution with very marked leftist characteristics, modern progressiveness, and then that was rejected, and we come to this new proposal, which is more leaning to the right, more extreme. So look at it from the outside. Says, what does the country want? What's going on with the country? And I think that the answer is in the question: what both proposals are answers to political moments, and that is the problem of this entire constitutional process. The first proposal that started from a constitutional convention elected in the midst of the pandemic, and after a few months of the social eclat, there was a constitution that would seem a response to the demands that we believed that arose from the social stage. I always thought that that was a misinterpretation of what that was. I think that if we distill what we demanded, what we were asking for, was basically 3 or 4 things. If you let out the noise and the flags and the protests and the fires, we had demands for better health, better education, better social services, better pensions, and a bit more. But the misinterpretation of that, which when Chile changed, led to a constitution really trying to change Chile. And if we look from the outside and you look at a middle income lady, we look at the south of Santiago, we saw that Chile hadn't changed, and we had the reaction of September 4, and we interpret that by the right this time that Chile hadn't changed at all, that Chile didn't demand anything, that Chile was very happy with the political economic model, that Chile was afraid of radicalization, and that was seen both in the first proposal of the constitutional proposal, and that therefore they're going to be designing something that is going to tie down a model that they thought was operational. So now we have a second constitutional proposition, which was not a misinterpretation of the current times, and then again from the right, we don't believe that the demands are really for better education, for health. But if you take the time to review those citizens' proposals, there's a web page you can look at, and it's interesting. You can filter it in order of likes for signatures, how popular those demands were. And if you look at the first 10, 20, 30 citizens' proposals, they're more rightist, abortions, security, with the exception of abortion, the same issues that we had in surveys a long time ago about abortion, concerns about immigration, about security, and the issue of pensions, but in the sense of something that has come up repeated times. He said, this money is mine. the protection of the pensions as if those savings were mine and not to allow the state to nationalize them or. But basically, those are the citizens' demands from the right, with an exception, with some exceptions. So that, and perhaps Veronica can speak more about that, how those that participation was processed. Uh, but it's funny to me that the political moment and the way in which the Constitutional Council interpreted that moment and those formal citizens' participation uh, is very different from what the political time or moment of the first proposal. But in both cases, they don't include the key part of the um, constitutional demands. We could have done it without a constitutional. The demands for better social protection, social services, especially in terms of pensions and health. Let's go back to Domingo first, but Veronica, as president of the commission, talking about Robert's point, what was the impact of the uh, consultations of the citizens' proposals? Was there an impact on the commission's work? Mm, oh, or was it just a lot of work but no impact? Thank you for the question because it's very interesting. The rules for procedure, we had a secretary for citizens participation, which was given to the process was given to the organization of the two main or universities in the Catholic and the Chile University, and they worked together with a network of universities throughout the country. And we set up 4 mechanisms for citizens participation. We received the initiative, popular initiatives. We had 10,000 signatures. They could submit their own rules or changes to specific rules in the pre-project. We worked on that pre-project as if we were the citizens who were another advisor that would submit these proposals to that the council was obliged to listen to and analyze it. Obviously, we didn't have to accept it, but there was another mechanism. It was the only one that was representative, which was the meetings. The university uh, selected some samples from the population and invited people to discuss about certain articles of the pre-project. So the vice president and myself uh, selected some of the articles that we thought were interesting and to to discuss by the citizens. That last mechanism that was also representative also in terms of gender, but there was a bias. There was a bias. Um, and those who participated in the initiatives which were male, with higher education, and from Santiago or urban areas. So that's very important also because there was also organizations. So that's also important to note. And uh, there was more enthusiasm and was also led by some political parties. The enthusiasm from a rightist organization, because this was a process in which it was possible for a council which was very uh, right leaning would accept that proposal, but um, there was unconformity in the previous participation process. So had seen their demands being rejected, had been accepted in the previous text, but had been rejected. But we also that even though uh, the initiative, the popular initiatives, we had women's movements, the rights of women's. There was a lot of mobilization by uh, organizations for the rights of girls, women, and adolescents. So the dynamics and when we received those proposals, we listened to the council. We selected those that were directly presented. Others were accepted by the universities. Uh, uh, and what happened was that in practice, those demands that had more to do with the sensitivity of the majorities of the councils were included, not directly, but the ideas were included in proposed for uh, from the right members of the council, and the other was we included, for example, they're not a private read, right? Those that required them, they wanted to have recognition for those rights, much much more sensitive, more conservative interpretation. So we did not receive we didn't accept the proposals from women rights, also for the rights of children and adolescents. There was a lot of resistance to recognizing the rights of children and adolescents. Uh, there was a lot of difficulty, and I would say that we didn't correct that this obligation that we part of the key of the process of recognizing the principle of a highest interest of the children in the proposal. There's a lot of resistance by the right from the United States, especially the people from Canada, and also um, recognizing the rights of children, women, girls, and boys affects or erodes the rights of the parents. So there was some major ideological arguments to illustrate the participation uh, in, in in the previous process and this one also. We uh, learned a lot, but we have to think about carefully how to we can respond to the people. People get organized, spend a lot of energy, and then mm, they were not really satisfactory the way they were accepted. So, as a theory, constitutional theory, we have to think about that.
Mil gracias, Verónica. Nada más una preguntita
Thank you,
más.
Veronica. One more question about
La nueva propuesta y
the
luego
new
ya pasamos
proposal, and then we go to
al tema
move
político que va a pasar
to the political issue. What is going to happen
con miradas hacia la votación y
uh,
después de la
with a
votación.
view
Quizás una pregunta para
to the vote? And
Verónica
another
cuando
question
ella
for
se
you
retire.
comes from Fernando Benavides.
Me gustaría
Um,
que se abordara el tema del sistema
talk
político,
about
cómo la
the
nueva propuesta
political
aborda
system,
el
how the new
sistema político.
proposal
Hay cambios
approaches
relevantes
the political
comparados
system
al
and irrelevant
sistema
changes compared to the
actual.
current system.
Estás en mute, Domingo.
Sí, Ken, solo para complementar algo que decía Verónica recién,
Well, I had
si
something
mal
that
no recuerdo,
Veronica was just saying.
la
If I
iniciativa popular
remember, the
principalmente
popular
que trataba
initiative
temas era la relativa a derechos y
was
protección de los
about
animales,
the
que
rights to
tenía
protection of
mayor
animals. It had the largest number
aprobación
of
a la
signatures.
protección, ¿no?
We mentioned
al
protection.
principio
At the end, there's only mentioned there.
democrático que se hizo. Ken, el diagnóstico que tuvimos en la comisión
The
experta,
diagnostics we had,
un diagnóstico de hecho, y Robert probablemente nos puede ayudar mucho más en
and
esto,
Robert can help us with that.
que yo creo que solamente ve una parte del
It
espectro,
only
es que
looks
la
at part of the
política
spectrum. The
política
political system of the
presenta un
has
Congreso o una representación política
a
muy fragmentada,
very fragmented political representation makes it very difficult to have a dialogue and to move forward in Congress. That's part of the diagnosis that at the expert commission we found. We had some alternatives that and some comprehensive ssolutions because talking to the political parties using regulations, there was a lot of pressure to not going into very heavy reforms. So what we did was we developed a certain of toolboxes, small tools that were trying to deal mainly with the problems with fragmentation. And it's not the only problem that we have in the political system in Chile, because it is a fragmentation problem. There has another huge problem, which is problem of representation. If you look at the surveys, people don't feel represented by the political parties that are fragmented here. So fragmentation, I would say, without time, without the ability to look at this problem of representation, we offered a series of measures to try to decrease it as we had for the presentation of the 5% when the council weakened that in, lose the percentage. So, so if you have the law, you have the a way to cheat it, the loophole. So there's a severe fragmentation problem. The problem is going to be with us in all other aspects until 2030. We had established it is matching the second presidential election with the election of the parliamentarians, which was rejected. It established some ideas about political discipline so that the political parties could discipline their parliamentarians and also avoid fractures inside, fragmentation inside the political parties. All these measures in terms of discipline, we only maintain the loss of the position for the candidate that renounces for the political party which they were elected. And we introduced a number of measures which were the priority agenda, fast tracked as to make it speedy. With a very complex environment of experience, although it has a intensive manifestation of its presidential, it's hyper presidentialist because of its autonomy. But we have a special phases is where the president controls the legislature. So the legislative process can't spend a penny without approval by the president. There's some things that only the president can submit to discussion by the Congress. So they rejected all those norms about fragmentation, eliminating part of those tools that we had included in that box. We had a more aggressive measure, more concerning from the point of view of the presentation, which is to reduce the number of parliamentarians in the chamber, the lower house, and meddle with the electoral districts. It's a gerrymandering at the constitutional level. I wouldn't expect it to be a place where we would make the decision. And this includes several problems because one of the main reasons, which is a very bad reason to justify the decrease the number of representatives, is that we're going to be paying less to the politicians. We're going to have to spend fewer pesos at the risk of increasing the gap in representation between my vote, and how I am represented in Parliament, because as of the ratio vote representation, Chile is very compared to the Chile history, going from 120 to 155 was very complex, and there's a setback, and it's and also an increase in fragmentation. Please respond. And I also want to ask another question.
Las ramificaciones. Y esta es una pregunta muy buena hecha por Carl Mitchell.
This is
Dice, las
a good question by Carl Mitchell.
han sugerido que el nuevo
The surveys have, or the polls have stated that the new document has very few possibilities of being approved, although up to 1/3 of the population seems to be torn. What has happened with this CLAT, and if the Constitution or not is ratified or not, what would Chile be doing next, constitutionally and politically? It's a short question.
The $50,000 question.
Sí, sí, pero tiene toda la palabra para responder antes lo que dijo Domingo
So,
y Verónica.
answer to what Domingo said, and perhaps Verónica.
Respecto a lo que dijo Domingo, yo creo que es bien interesante
What Domingo said is interesting because there's a convergence between three trends, or among three trends, which is of concern. You have a traditional mistrust of the political parties on the right. The Congress was very seen in the Constitution of 1980, but this mistrust exists and survives. Then there's what we know about public opinion, their attitude towards politics, what Domingo mentioned, that the politicians make a lot of money. There's too many politicians and too much politics. And it should be better if there were few politicians. And there's a problem from the left and some problems that include the problems of representation, which include also the problems of party discipline, fragmentation. That combination of those three ideas is pretty harmful for a constitutional election, because we're supposedly designing the party system in Congress, designing a party system with distrusting politics. It's is what we're seeing in this proposal. And that also can be connected to my previous answer. There's a common thread in the social eclat and these results. There's a study since which they called it Chile's populist movement. Chile, we hadn't seen, as in other countries, hadn't seen the eruption of populism, but there was in this eclat, there was a anti-elitist, anti-party discourse that had some populist elements, and that mistrust of the elites, of the parties, of the institutions, now was reflected in terms of a constitution which reduces the number of parliamentarians, doesn't do much to strengthen the political parties, in addition, except for some lines of which for the independent parliament members of parliament. I agree with Domingo that reducing the number of seats is doesn't really mean much. It increases the popular mistrust of politicians. The numbers, the political literature says, perhaps the ideal figure would be about 170. So we're very much below the inadequate level of representation in that respect. So there's polls, what could happen in the future? We've seen over the past few weeks a rising trend in support. I don't know whether this is going to come to 50% or not. I have two feelings, two ideas. On the one hand, I think that there's exhaustion, retired. The public opinion is fed up with. They might drive that for the approval. And the previous proposal, last year's proposal, had some ideas that some phrases, some ideas that really scared people. The idea of the um, plurinationality, the way we treated fair price and expropriations. There was a lot of things that most of the people don't read. Don't read the Constitution. Well, how many? 180 pages. Most people don't read the Constitution. Therefore, they based on the messages they get and these key words. I have this idea that this proposal, with the exception of the issue of abortion, does not include such key ideas or key words that would have to be. Somebody says, well, this doesn't change much. Uh, the political system remains more or less the same. The economic system remains more or less the same. Let's put this an end to this and vote. That was one of my the feelings that I got. But on the other hand, and we also understand that leaves everything open. The process isn't going to end because the demands, as we mentioned here, this constitution is not a product of an agreement. This is a process, and that that's what the people expected from the constitutional process, to have a constitution, not a leftist, but rather something that has been agreed on. So whatever happens, lose or win, the demand for a consensual constitution will go on. The question is, after going through the democratic process, which in somehow we legitimize what going on afterwards, either the Constitution of 1980 or the new proposal, perhaps that political legitimacy will lower that demand. But I get the feeling that certain political sectors, especially the left, are going to insist on a proposal that is more to their liking, but also more consensual. So I have these two feelings that on the one hand, we want the process to end, and there's probably an idea that it isn't going to be over. Thank you, Veronica. Two very short comments. Uh, According to what Robert says, I would say that there is a very big consensus on the left, especially the left party. There's something, a very minority voices as part of the Communist Party, which are thinking that if that proposal is rejected, we would have to start a new constitutional process. So there's a major process that among the left that we shouldn't have a new constitutional process, at least for some years, although we could have made reforms through the text that we approve. And with respect to the other things that the listeners should know, that in addition to what Robert said, that people says, well, let's approve that whatever happens. That is a reason why people could approve that. The other reason could be that we have introduced in this constitution a lot of populist norms that have electoral purposes, not only to win this, uh, to approve this constitution, but also this constitution, if approved, would be a sort of stepping stone to better position the presidential candidate of the Republican Party, which is the party with the hegemony in this process. So they were very concerned about including certain norms about tax exemptions in the Constitution, the percentage of anti-migration, norms that have to do with security, anti-terrorism, things like that, which are very populist norms. which are not really supported by evidence or by that they're going to be ineffective, but that they are very uh, attractive. So they were included there, and they could be used as a reason for some people to approve the Constitution. This is one of the criticisms that I have. Uh, it was the constitutional process was contaminated by short-term objectives that have nothing to do with the electoral process or the considerations that should be included in the constitutional process. When the electoral considerations change over time.
Gracias, Verónica. Domingo, tienes la palabra.
Domingo, you have the floor.
Sí, que yo para terminar creo que aquí hay que hacerse la siguiente pregunta
We have
respecto a
to
la estabilidad.
ask yourself about stability.
¿Alguien cree que la
Does
estabilidad
anyone
se
believe that
simplemente
stability will be achieved by the fact that a piece of paper called Constitution is approved on December 17, or whether somebody believes that, which I agree with, that stability is only going to be possible as long as there's an agreement which is halfway covered by political will. You can see that living the extremes, the ends or the extremes should be a little more discontented. From the point of view of political stability, there's no worse news that like happened in 1990s. On the one, you have a strong activism calling to replace it, so that the main problems can, in addition to the lack of political support across the political spectrum, is two questions. One, there's a lot of regulations which are useless to achieve the ends that we propose. And Gonzalo Garcia, is my opinion, he has a constitutional proposition, and he called it an arsenal. It's open for litigation to the least detail. And that litigation, which is something that we wanted to avoid, is wide open in every way. We can never offer a certainty or stability like that we should be looking for, that tries to move those discussions to ordinary politics. So what it doesn't resolve beforehand as certain models for public policies, it's open to litigation. So you ask yourself, didn't we ask for this deliberately? Robert, last word.
Hay dos puntos. Yo creo que me llama la atención. Domingo menciona la palabra estabilidad. Ya se escucha desde
you mentioned stability. They emphasize the issue of stability, and they believe that this tool would give more stability to the country. It makes sense that they say it because they understand that's what they are looking for. But I'm surprised because I agree with Domingo. I don't see where that stability would come from. Both because of the content and the political context. I would agree with, I would end with this, that one of the most relevant results what has nothing to do with the Constitution, has to do with electoral politics. He Verónica mentioned the calculation and the participation, what they wanted to include or not include in the proposal. This is complicating the government's position, because President Boric, not only government, but if you listen to the major candidate for the right, her position, her announcement about being in favor, it's very, very funny, because she says this, I don't like it very much, but we have to put an end to the process. As a campaign slogan, it's pretty weak. Well, we're not very happy, but we'll have to put an end to it. this is complicating even for the a candidates like Evans. For the government, it's more complex because the government parties are going to be in opposition, but the president has a responsibility of making sure that it's a democratic, clean process, that the government is not accused of supporting one or the side or the other, although the parties are going to be doing that. And finally, how do we interpret the results? How do we interpret the triumph or defeat? So their candidates, even in the Republican or people in the Republican Party, that they say that they are opposed to that for different reasons. And somebody says that they found that the Constitution was too leftist. What does that do? That has rejected the triumph of the December 17th. Some people are going to say, we also want, they also say, and the left is not going to be able to say, this is a triumph of our ideas versus their ideas. And I think that will make it very complicated for the president because he has 2 years to rule, and an additional defeat in the context where he needs to approve reforms, he needs to work with the Congress, etc., is going to be leaving him in a much weaker position. Thank you, Robert. There's a lot more to say about this, and we are over the time by 15 minutes or so. Thank you very much to everybody, Verónica, Domingo, Robert, and all the listeners that have joined us. As I said at the beginning, this seminar has been recorded, and we're going to put it up on our webpage, ccac.com, today or later tomorrow morning. Thank you very much for being with us again.